Get started on it. We're getting started a little late tonight because of the fact that a lot of people wanted to go to church. The agenda for this meeting that I have is opening at 8:30, and no matter what your watch says, mine says 8:30. Minutes of the previous meeting, treasurer's report, old business, and I think that maybe we ought to bring up one item of old business, the Wheel Fest Parade. Some of you who got that far into your newsletter reading, you find out that I made another mustache again, and but maybe we ought to talk about that again, maybe not. Under new business, I have a communication from the Historical Society of Michigan, a nominating committee report, hopefully, and election committee appointments, appoint an ice cream social committee if we're going to have one, and then one other item, communications that we have received and communications that we sent, and announcements, and then our scheduled program. Does anyone have any additions that we should make to this agenda? If not, then let's give it a try. Minutes of previous meeting. Are you ready to report minutes of? Yeah. Okay.
Want me over here?
I think, yeah, probably, because then it'll pick up on the video mic too.
Oh, okay. The meeting was called to order by President Jim Duletsky at 8 p.m. and the agenda was presented. The minutes were read by the President since the Secretary was unable to be present at the meeting when it opened. The minutes were approved as read. The Treasurer's report was presented showing a balance on hand of $10,558.81. The report was approved. Under old business, a nominating committee was required since 2 terms, those of Art Egeltinger and Gene Cobb, are expiring. Doris Carpenter and Art Carpenter volunteered to serve on this committee. Under new business, since the April meeting of the Society falls on Holy Thursday this year, it was moved and seconded that the date remain the same, but the time of the meeting be moved back to 8:30 p.m. The motion was approved. Ellen Johnson, speaking for the Garden Club, requested financial assistance with planting this year and stated that the ladies hope to add plantings on the north side of the building. It was moved and seconded that the Society donate $250 to the Garden Club for this purpose. The motion carried. There was a request from the city for the Society to participate in the Wheel Fest 1995 parade. There was no response from the membership. Communications for the month were noted, including a memorial for longtime Society member Francis Crook. George Gerbstadt presented a videotape of Gerbstadt family pictures. He also offered to get a copy of the tape for the museum. Our president then introduced the speaker for the evening, Liz Arthur. Liz told us all about the present arts program here in Wayne and also her vision of the future for the arts in our city. Refreshments were served following the program. Respectfully submitted.
Are there any questions concerning the minutes? Any corrections? Anyone remember it? That's what I thought. Next thing on the, okay, they stand approved as presented. According to the Treasurer's report, we had a balance of $10,558.81 from last month. We collected two membership dues for $10, and we had the total expenses of $76.72, and that was basically for 2 mailings, or 200 stamps actually, with the 500. I mean, with the 10 mailings a year, we need about 90 mailings per month, so that it comes out pretty close. We had for a couple of the newsletters, the copier here in the museum seems to wrinkle up the newsletter, and so I took them elsewhere to get them copied. Hopefully that you will bear with me on that. That's where the total expenses of $76.72 came from. We now have a balance of $10,492.09. Does anyone have any question concerning the treasurer's report? If not, it's approved, subject to audit. Old business. Does anyone wish to open up and discuss the Wheel Fest parade or not? No one wants to take that on. No one wants to discuss it. If not, then let's move on. We've still got another meeting to go. Maybe somebody will bring something up next year, or next meeting. Under new business, I have a communication from the Historical Society of Michigan asking me to fill out another form. And I guess I'm capable of doing that, except that it concerns a Michigan History Directory. Historical societies, agencies, and commissions. The 6th edition will be the 1995 edition, and should we respond, and well, I guess we're in meeting now. I could ask whether you people would like us to respond. I was going to do it. Should we or shouldn't we respond and be on the list of members, a society listed with the Historical Society of Michigan? What's your pleasure?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. Anyone object to us filling out that form? Okay, we'll so do that. Now, the cost of one of these particular books, which will come sometime in August, I think it is, by the time they get it all printed and so forth, is $10 plus tax plus $3 postage. Do we as a society like to purchase one of those books? And if so, I'm waiting for a motion.
I move we purchase one.
Second.
It's been moved and supported that we purchase a Michigan History Directory for the museum. All those in, any discussion concerning that? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, the same sign. It's an official motion. Nominating committee, are you here to report? No, I don't. So
They're at the
let's.
church.
Pardon?
They're at the church, and it wasn't
Okay,
over yet.
they'll be here shortly then. Okay. And well, then we'll dispense. We'll save this election committee appointment also. Ice cream social. We've had a couple of good ones. Do we want to have another one this year? Usually around the first part of July, last part of June. What's your pleasure? Nobody wants an ice cream social.
Yeah,
Oh,
proceed.
oh, okay. Thanks. How about anyone else? Does anyone else want a ice cream social?
I'll make
Okay.
a cake.
I want to see all of your hands raised in joyous whatever, saying that you're going to volunteer to to chair the committee. Okay. If no one from the floor volunteers, I already have a volunteer, but I know that she needs help. And she needs more help than I can give her. You ought to know by now. Nelda Doletsky has volunteered to act as chairperson for the event. Do you want to set a date, or do you want to let her set the date, or do you want, what happens? What's your pleasure?
What is the date on it?
What is the date?
The first July.
They ought to know.
The first Sunday in July is what?
It's probably the 4th. Yeah.
The Methodist Church is having one toward the end of June.
Are they? Okay, well, we don't want to have it the same day.
Yeah, it's around the 21st or something like that.
We did that once a couple of years ago. What have you got, Emmons?
Well, the first Monday's the 3rd, and the day before the 4th, so you'd want the
No,
10th, I suppose.
that's why I said the 4th. You don't want it on the 4th.
The 10th would be
The 10th?
Wait, what, Sunday? The 9th.
9th? Okay, it's been suggested then that we shoot for July 9th. I would like to not hold that down to say that we will have it on the 9th until we find out what, there's a possibility of the Congregational Church or somebody else having something, and to have it on the same day would not be go.
I think the Methodist Church is having it, is the 26th of Sunday?
26th of June,
Yeah.
25th
Yeah.
is a Sunday.
25th.
It's,
Yeah.
it's at the end of
That's
June.
when they're having an
Yeah.
ice cream social.
Yeah, that's why I think why we wanted to go with a different Sunday.
Right.
Have it, but let's let the committee shoot for the 9th. If that happens to be a good Sunday, why we'll go. And as long as who's going to promise that there will be no rain? Oh, God. You people, you don't want to volunteer for anything. Okay, ice cream. We have that ice cream social and,
I'll call people.
Pardon?
I'll give people the help.
okay, that isn't what I'm looking at you for. I'm looking at you for something else. So that, okay, I guess in the meantime, while she gets ready, I can read the communications that we had. We had correspondence from the Silver Billet Industries that they're photo restorers, want our business. Westland Historical Commission minutes for both February and March. We received those. 2 letters from Career Tracks. Now, that's a company that also wants to sell us something. As well as training sessions, seminars, and so forth. I believe $450 for 4 days seminar. Friends of the Detroit Public Library on their book sale sent us a communication for that, and also their Wheels publication. And I understand that this is going to be their final tract that they're sending out. We received the program from, or the Mill Race Quarterly from Northville Historical Society, the Quarterly from Livingston County Historical Society, the Plymouth Historical Society Quarterly, and a note from the Francis Crook family was a thank you note for the memorial that we had for them. Also a note from the Wayne Garden Club. I think maybe that I can read that. And then the Historical Society of Michigan directory update. I went through that briefly, and we've already said that we were going to take care of that. Okay? Dear Mr. Duletsky, all of the members of the Wayne Garden Club wish to express our thanks to the Wayne Historical Society for deciding to share in the expenses of the plantings at the museum. It is something that the people of this city can enjoy. We have a group of weeders that help keep the beds neat looking in the months after the plantings. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. Again, thank you for sharing in the expense of something our club enjoys doing. Yours truly, Betty Grimes, corresponding secretary. I guess that's all of the communications we received. We sent out approximately 90 newsletters. I think that there were 3 or 4 of them were to, 2 of them were to new members, and 2 or 3 of them were to prospective members, and we sent along the little pink envelope with that, intimating that if they wish to continue to receive the newsletter, that maybe that they ought to join up. Announcements. Wayne Cleanup Day is April 22nd, and everyone is to meet at Gowdy Park. That's over behind the City Hall. At 9 a.m. they'll be serving coffee and donuts, and 12 noon, when the groups come back from their separate places of cleanup, they will be furnished hot dogs and coffee and or whatever. Most of the kids get some juice, pop, and what have you. Look at there, 20 minutes. Nellie, you had something that you wanted to take care of right about now? Oh, okay, you weren't going to say anything. All right. It just happens that along about this time, we have a young fella here that, a couple of times we've already celebrated his birthday, and I think that we want to do that again this year. And so I wonder if Mr. Dapper Dan, he's picking his fingernail or something there. Tony, would you come up here, because my wife has something for you.
We're gonna sing. Let's sing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tony. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, everybody.
I think Tony is probably the youngest 94-year-old man I know of, and he always I always have to try and outdress him or something, because he is a Dapper Dan, I think.
No contest.
But now you women, you're going to have to wait until the 27th. He tells me his birthday is the 27th. No hugs and kisses now, okay? That's okay, Tony. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Tonight, I think we're probably privileged to have as a guest presenter this evening one of our, as you read it in your newsletter, a local businessman who has, he grew up in Wayne, or at least in the environs around here. I believe his dad did, even his grandfather, and I believe that they were, shall we say, raised on the printing floor of the printing establishment. Maybe not so much the latest one, but anyway, Jon Hisey has said that he would be willing to come and talk to us a little bit about the Hisey family, and maybe a little bit about the newspapering as he remembers it. He's not that old, but he does remember a few things about the newspaper business in Wayne. John, do you want to take me off the hook here and...
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim, for inviting me here. I'm very honored to be asked to do this. It was a good lesson for me. That's why I have to have these notes here. I wasn't really around when the paper was thriving, so I did have to take my grandfather's knowledge and my father's knowledge and write them down. And so I kind of have a chronological order here that I'll present to you. I really would like to thank again the Society and Jim for having me here. Jim, when you were talking about the Wheelfest parade, I think Dale Butler was trying to raise his hand to volunteer, but you might want to speak with him later on that. First, before I start about the paper or what I know, let me tell you a little bit about the Hisey family and where we all are right now. First, my grandfather, Jim, is here, and his wife, Darlene, my grandma Darlene, she's over here. My grandma Beverly lives in Florida. My grandpa and Beverly had 3 sons. My Uncle Jim lives in Connecticut with his wife Martha and their son Christopher. My dad is the second oldest, John, and his wife Carol live up in Charlevoix now. They had 4 children, my elder sister Joan, me, my sister Jennifer, and my sister Jessica. My Uncle Jerry still lives around in town. He works for Delta Airlines. He's been there for about 27 years, I believe. He's still there at Delta, and he has 2 children, Janelle and Chad. Chad is going to school right now to become a fireman, and maybe he'll be a fireman locally here. In 1916, from the best that I can come up with as far as these dates go, in 1916, my great-grandfather, Ventry Ross Hisey, purchased the Wayne Weekly. It was called the Wayne Weekly at that time, and I believe there are copies up here from around that time period. With his wife, Lois, my great-grandfather, or my great-grandmother, and my grandpa's mother, they started that paper. Ventry was only 23 years old at the time. And, you know, if you think about back then with the local paper, that was quite an ordeal. That was the local news source and probably the major news source for this area. The television was in its infancy back then, if not till later on from that. The radio, you know, we didn't have CNN. There wasn't a lot of ways to gather your news except for the local paper. And the Wayne Weekly was the paper back then for this area. My great-grandfather, Ventry Ross Hisey, he was born in Yale, Michigan, and later came to Wayne. I'm not quite sure when the date was. Grandpa can probably clue us in later. But the other thing that my great-grandfather Ventry did locally here was him and a half a dozen other people started the Rotary Club here in Wayne. And at the time, there was a rule in Rotary that the township or the city had to be at least 5,000 people for a Rotary Club. And Wayne was somewhere in the proximity of like 3,800 people at that time, so they didn't qualify. Well, my great-grandfather and, like I say, half a dozen other men went to Chicago and petitioned Rotary International to get a club here in Wayne. And it took them approximately 2 years to do it, but they were able to get it. Wayne, Michigan was the first city to get a Rotary Club with under 5,000 people. And so I'm kind of proud about that. I'm the incoming Wayne Rotary president for next year, so I have a little bit of a special part on this. So thank you. With the Wayne Weekly was started in the location of Bowers Cleaners that I recall of it. I believe it's now moved over to Metro Mall, but the location there on Michigan Avenue, I believe it was Fisher's Cleaners as well back then. That's where the paper was, in that building. And in 1927, Ventry and Lois got a divorce, and Lois took over the paper. Ventry moved to Coral Gables, Florida, and I believe was involved in the railroad industry, if my notes are correct and my memory is correct. So if you can imagine Lois Hisey taking over a company, a newspaper, having a son to raise as well. It was pretty ambitious for back in those times. A single mother, and if you figure how complicated it was to put a newspaper together in any time. I mean, Jim, putting your newsletter together, I'm sure it takes you quite a while to do that. Just imagine putting together an 8-page format of news and all the current events, the things that change. This was something that had to be done not only on last-minute changes, but you had to plan for in a week at a time. So I can imagine that was probably pretty hectic back then for her to do that. And from what I understand, from what people tell me, she was a real strong woman. Many of you may know her or remember her. So I think that's kind of a neat thing to have in my history. My grandpa came along. They moved the paper from where Bowers Cleaners is, and they moved to where Gerbstadt's Bakery was. Does anybody remember where that was? Okay, well, the paper was in the basement of there. Grandpa has lots of stories about the Gerbstadt family and the bakery there. When Grandpa came to help Grandma Lois, or Great-Grandma Lois, he left he was an industrial engineer. And I guess she was having some problems with her editor, keeping him on staff. Maybe he was a little shady, I don't know. I don't remember his name, and I won't mention it because he might be related to somebody here. But so Grandpa, feeling sorry for her mother, maybe not feeling sorry, but seeing a challenge, he left his industrial engineer, and I did not know he was an industrial engineer till I read his notes. Left that job, and which was probably a gamble, to come and work at that paper, work at a small newspaper. But together, they took the 8-page Wayne Weekly, turned it to the Dispatch. I believe it was around 1927 when Great-Grandma Lois took over. She changed the name to the Dispatch. They took an 8-page newspaper and turned it to a 16-page newspaper. So doubling the text that they had to come up with, more advertisers. And again, that was a very ambitious change in that paper. There weren't too many small local weekly newspapers that were a 16-page format, and my grandfather gave him a lot of credit for taking on that challenge and doing that. I'm sure that was very difficult to do. The other thing that I have found in my readings is that Lois was a pretty shrewd businesswoman. She would trade up the presses. There was quite a few presses that have changed hands, and they always were trying to stay on the edge of technology, if you will, for those times. I'm not too familiar with the technical aspects of, and I'm sure you don't want to hear it anyway, but of printing presses. But it was a hot press. You had to melt lead. Jim Doletsky is probably very familiar with. I guess he has a lot of these presses in his basement at home. But they were complicated machines. You had the linotype machines. You had to have all these little brass characters and put them in place, and again, it was very complicated to do, and it wasn't easy like we have computers today. We just type it in and push a button and it's printed out. Lois was a charter founder of a lot of the little social clubs in town. She was an Eastern Star, remember, charter of the Eastern Star? Is that the what is now the Soroctus Club? Is that, no? Is Eastern Star still around?
Sure.
Okay. She was a charter member of that. The Garden Club, Literary Club. So there's, I didn't realize how much history that our family does have in this town until I started asking questions, I guess. In 1933, my great-grandma Lois, her father was ill in Yale, Michigan, so she moved back to Yale, sold the paper to a fellow named Frank Ames. And he ran it for a couple years. In 1935, great-great-grandpa Huffman passed away, and so Grandma came back, great-grandma Lois came back to Wayne and reclaimed the paper. I guess there was maybe a little bit of financial trouble at the time, and so she took it back over again in 1935. In 1942, she purchased the Wayne County Review, which is, I believe there's a copy up here in the corner, and moved the paper from Gerbstadt's Bakery to where the library is today, on the corner of Sims and Wayne. Sims and Wayne, yeah. And I guess that's about, in 1945, that's when Grandpa came in to the paper full time. He was 26 years old at the time. And again, I got a little earlier but he left his industrial engineer job right after the war. So you can imagine a lot of things were going on in the world and in the town, and the Dispatch covered it. Grandpa continued upgrading new presses, staying on the cutting edge of technology at that time. At one time, the Dispatch had the largest rotary press in the country, I believe, for a weekly paper. Again, that's something that I think is kind of special in the past. Grandpa also, there's a story told I don't know if he admits it or not, but the way my dad tells it, Grandpa went to Iowa, and there was the Hawkeye Gazette, took a press apart piece by piece, dismantling it. Now that part I can understand because my grandfather, I think that's where I got it, is good at taking things apart, but it takes us a long time to put things back together. And reassembled this press back here in Wayne. And without, really knowing anything about putting a press together, I think that's another feather in his hat. In the mid to late 50s, the union came to town into the paper business, and after the first year, in being a unionized paper, they struck. And from what I understand, that really crippled the paper because they had these time restrictions. It was a 16-page format, advertisers, and it really hurt. That was quite a blow to the paper. But Grandpa was able to recover from that and get it back to going. I think it went down to an 8-page paper again because of that for a while. And a couple years later, they struck again. My dad took, the way he tells it, Grandpa came to him and asked him to help him out at the paper. But knowing my dad, and he was 22 at the time, had 2 young children, myself and my oldest sister. Did a lot of odd jobs. Worked at Ford's for a little bit. Worked at Northwest Airlines for a little bit. I think it was probably good timing for both. Grandpa probably needed him, but I think more so Dad needed the job. So he came to the paper at the Dispatch and helped Grandpa get it, keep it going. And my dad was 1 credit short of a teaching degree at Eastern Michigan, and so who knows? The way things are now. I'm sure my dad is real happy that he took Grandpa up on that challenge. It seems to me that all of the Hisey people in the past have taken on a lot of challenges in their lives and have done well with them. In 1969, there was, I guess, a little bit of a fiasco. My dad hired Roger Turner from the Eagle, and it doesn't seem to be such a big deal to me, but I guess at the time it was quite an uproar. They changed the paper from a traditional broadsheet, which are the forms at the top here, and they took it to a tabloid, which is this paper on the bottom here. That's the tabloid section. One thing was to cut down costs. That was probably the main thing. In 1969 as well, my dad started a company called Metro Graphics. It was a typesetting company. They did a lot of work for other newspapers. They did a lot of work for newsletters, a lot of printing jobs. That was one thing that the Dispatch seemed to do. There was a lot of little feeder companies that started and a lot of other papers that started. There was a lot of equipment that came from the Dispatch and went to other places. I believe Imperial Press still operates one of the presses that my grandfather had. And also in 1969, my dad, seeing that it was a little bit easier, there was a local office supply store. I don't remember the name, but it was here in town on Michigan Avenue. It was going out of business, and that's where my dad bought all his office supplies for the paper. He had to go all the way to Dearborn to buy his office supplies now. And he started thinking, he said, well, shoot, maybe I can just start a little office supply store in the front of the paper, take a small section, and sell pens and pencils. Then I won't have to drive all the way to Dearborn. Well, it was easier for him to sell pens and pencils than it was to sell ads, I take it. So later on in 1970, he sold the paper to Roger Turner and some partners that Roger had. I don't know who those partners were, but it was Roger Turner was one of the main investors in the paper. And so that was out of the Hisey family in 1970, late 1970. In 1971, the Dispatch name was changed to the Heritage. I don't know if anybody remembers the Heritage at all. It was only published for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I used to sell them. I used to sell the Dispatch and the Heritage at the, let me get my orientation right, it was at the old Wayne Bank foyer. And I remember that very well. I think they were 10 cents a copy or something like that back then. My grandpa, speaking of the price of the paper, my grandpa can remember in his notes him and his mother driving, and it was in a quote, so all the way out to Haggerty Road to collect 50 cents a year subscription from a farmer out on Haggerty Road. And with the way the transportation was back in those days, I can imagine Haggerty probably was way out there with dirt roads and no pavement, Model Ts. So the paper was a total community paper. In 1971, it's sad to say that there was a fire that broke out and destroyed the paper. The fire burnt everything in sight. It was behind the Gates Furniture Building. If anybody remembers that fire, the paper was in that fire. The offices, the equipment, and my dad lost everything because the Heritage went out of business and wasn't able to pay the note that they owed my dad for selling the paper. So fortunately, he started Parkway, which, by the way, a lot of people ask me where the park is when they come to the store, and it's called Parkway because my dad grew up on Park Street in Wayne. And also because when he took over the paper, he moved it from the library location to the Young Hardware Building. If anybody remembers where the Young Hardware Building was. I can remember that building because I used to play with my sister upstairs in all the equipment that was left there, the paint machines and that kind of stuff. So that's what happened to the paper. The fire wiped it out, and I don't know if it would still be going today or not. The Eagle came along somewhere in there, and I know there was quite a lot of competition between the two local papers. That's basically it. Well, I've taken over Parkway a couple years ago. I've been there for 12 years now. Doesn't seem like that long, but our family still. I live in Wayne. My wife Regina is here. We just bought a house on Laurel Street in Wayne, and we're fixing that up. In fact, that's what I was doing earlier today. I hope I got a little paint off my face and my hands. But that's basically it in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions, be glad to try and answer them for you, or maybe I can get my grandpa to answer a few questions. If not, thank you very much again for having us here. Appreciate it, and appreciate the interest that you have in our family.
Thank you, John. I'm surprised nobody has asked any questions. He answered all of the questions that you might have about the newspaper business and what have you in Wayne. I think that if he had another year, he probably would have come up with another hour and of goodies about the paper. I noticed he also mentioned his grandpa quite a bit, and I saw him looked like he was smiling half the time anyway, but not maybe all the time. We certainly appreciate you coming to us and telling us a little bit about the family, and I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to help you in some way, because I was amazed at what I found out when looking up for things on this particular subject. And Mr. Smith.
Yes, Jim, who were their best advertisers? Who solicited the advertising business, and what did it take from in the 40s?
What was the question?
Did you have a regular advertiser? Who were your good advertisers, and was it a repeat thing? So you had a going customer, and
Well, we had, from an advertising standpoint, we had most of the national advertising in automobiles, and we and the grocery stores, major grocery stores.
They were paid by, in other words, Harold Dietrich had the ad, or Buick had the ad?
Yeah, he had ads, and then we had Gates, Water Gates was a big advertiser, furniture store. And, goodness, and then we had many, many smaller ads of local people. Pretty heavy, we would run 24 to 28 pages at a time. But to keep the presses busy, we brought in, we printed chains of papers from Ohio and around the suburbs of Detroit, and printed the Observer papers in Livonia at one time.
Was it because your equipment was superior to anything else in the area?
Well, it was bigger. It was bigger, but the equipment that we had toward the end, I think they had that size presses in the Grand Rapids paper and, of course, the Metros. But we were press poor. We had so much press, we had to keep them busy. Thank you.
That is one thing. I had the privilege of going over on Main Street when they were over in what I call, somebody else has called it the Kaiser Fraser Garage. I called it the Studebaker Garage. Bert Moore was in there for a while. In fact, I bought a 1950 Studebaker out of that particular building. And I thought that there were two presses in there. Were there not two rotaries in there? Web-fed rotaries? Or did you just have one?
Well, in that building, in the old garage,
Yes.
on Main, when we ended up, there was just one big one. It had a bunch of units.
Yeah,
They all
okay.
tied in together.
Yeah, that's where I first came across stereocasting also. The thing that when you had letterpress printing, you had to have, and in a rotary press, you needed the printing had to be on a circle or half circle so that it could be mounted on a drum so that it would print continuously. And you had what we called, well, we still call it web press, because the web meaning that the paper came in a large roll, yay wide, and it was that was one of the things in putting the one roll through, and then having to hook on a flying paster to keep that press running. And you didn't dare stop that press because, oh boy, what a problem that was to get the thing rolling again and getting it printed, because all of the wasted paper that the press would actually slur the first few sheets, and at 10 cents a paper you couldn't very well afford to lose a couple hundred newspapers just because somebody wasn't fast enough to get the second roll of paper going in time to keep everything going. Today, we don't even do offset printing anymore. I guess we do, but it doesn't happen very often. The new technology is such that it's mind-boggling to think of what it was with the first newspapers and the Dispatch in its in its banner stated that they were printing for 77 years, starting back in 1877. And I think that comes from when they purchased the Wayne County Review, putting them both together and moving over to Sims and Wayne Road was when they bought the other paper, some very peculiar things that I found in looking up information concerning the paper. The whole thing is mind-boggling, and I'm very, very glad that we did have something here concerning the Wayne Dispatch and the Hisey family, because they were so closely knit together in Wayne. I don't know how you could separate them, because there might have been 1 or 2 years or a few years where the Hisey family was not editors for the last, well, since 1915, 1916, something like that, all the way through to just a little while ago. And most of us here remember the Wayne Dispatch as our daily paper. And it's interesting sometimes to see some of the ads of what the merchants sold, and how times have changed. Druggists sold varnish and paint, not hardware stores. Different things that you can find out through looking through the ads. Again, John, thanks for coming. We have one other little short part of business to take care of, and that's the nominating committee. Do you want to report nominating committee?
We have 2 people that are going to, that we need to vote on. Arthur Eicheltinger and Gene Cobb.
Okay.
Unless there's somebody else that would like to run.
All right. In other words, let's open the nominations for trustees. We have 2 to replace the 2 who are in already and said that they would consent to serve again. Is there anyone who would like to enter their name in nomination? If not, then we have 2 candidates for the same for the 2 positions on the board. I wonder if can we ask the nominating committee if you will act as an election committee next meeting. That's one. You will?
I'm in town.
If you're in town, okay. All right. The nominating committee then has consented to act as an election committee in our next meeting. Make sure that all of you attend next meeting so that we can have an election. I might even announce our next meeting is in July 10th, is it? I think. I mean, next meeting is in May. Mustache. Our next meeting is in May 10th, and at that time we're going to have Neil Hepburn, one of our members here, to talk to us about the house that he lives in. And he has substantial records and so forth, copies of things where he has gone down to Detroit and did some research in the county records that indicate that the house in which he is now living in may be the oldest house in Wayne. And let's come next time and we'll find out exactly what he has to tell us. And maybe we will also agree. Neil is right back there. You want to stand up, Neil, so that everybody knows who you are? That's Neil. And he's going to be our guest speaker next time. Is there anything else that should properly be brought before this meeting? If not, sir.
May I say one thing? As a teenager, not even a teenager, the first job I ever had in Wayne was a soda jerk for Jack O'Brien.
How much?
He was a good boss. He was a good boss.
You had to get rid of them, so we went to publish a newspaper, is that it?
Who would that? Jim Hisey.
Morning soul.
I hope that all of you will stay seated long enough for you to be first in line at the chow line back there.
That wasn't
I
him.
understand that the butlers again have provided the goodies for this evening. I hope that you don't all take off and run off.